Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to episode 519 of Don't Worry About the Government, Zoom Limited Edition. We're back. I'm here with Dan. Hi, Dan. And Cody. Hmm. And we are still talking about the various topics in the news here. Up next, I want to talk about. All right, Joe Biden's State of the Union. Did y'all watch Joe Biden's State of the Union at all this week?
No, I did not. I caught the clips. I mean, it was certainly different from the last 4 years, but felt pretty milk toast.
Cody, any thoughts on the State of the Union? Even as anything that Biden said during it? Yeah, headlines or policy announcements or anything?
I thought the $15 call was interesting to see within the text of the speech. I'm very skeptical of that happening at all, and I had grown even more skeptical of that being a thing that he would rhetorically mention.
He tweeted about it again today.
It feels like I am very cynical about all of this, but it feels like there is going to be an effort to do something, like finger quotes around that, to do something with this, which is very fascinating to me because I did not buy for a second during the campaign that this was a thing that he actually cared about and was going to put time and political capital into. And I feel like with the fact that he put it in this speech, that he talked, as you said, Dan, tweeted about it again today, I feel like, oh, so you are trying to do something with this. That's not what you're swerving in a direction I did not expect. And Chris, you and I have talked about this. Joe is a guy who doesn't swerve that often. He just goes on that road straight. But
no, and he will almost to a fault. He'll tell you where he's at. The minimum wage thing has been very interesting. I kind of share your thoughts here, where I think he is going to do, in air quotes, something. And I think you're right to identify it's in the speech. He tweeted about it also this week via executive action. He raised the minimum wage for all federal employees to $15 an hour. So, things are happening on that front. And it seems to me like if he's raising it for federal employees, that is the forerunner to some sort of minimum wage increase. I think what continues to be the elephant in the room, and we're seeing this now with DC statehood, is Joe Manchin and the reasonable centrists and their reasonable concerns about DC statehood. I saw Susan Collins, centrist extraordinaire, propose a novel idea of Washington, D.C. just upping and joining Maryland, which I'm pretty sure is not constitutional.
We might as well just make them part of West Virginia and rerun some senatorial elections there.
I'm sorry. The real quickly here. The
West bridge, a nice little 1 mile long bridge across that little stretch of Virginia to attach DC to West Virginia.
Here's something nobody has talked about. What if we make DC Ohio?
I mean, it could do a lot to improve Ohio.
And this is getting tossed out by centrists, and for the same, they'll go, it's not constitutional to vote on DC statehood because technically, according to the Constitution, DC is supposed to be its own sovereign entity, independent from any state. The capital of the country is not supposed to be part of a state. And then with the same breath, also DC should be part of Maryland. I'm fine with DC having representation so long as we can marginalize it. What? It also tells you the game really being played here, right?
Sure.
In the case of Manchin, Collins looks good in comparison to Manchin. Manchin can't even tell you where he stands on DC statehood. He's still hiding the ball on that. So like the
Well, no,
question,
he wants it to be a constitutional. He wants to
yes.
send it to the states or
No, to the people. But
to the
by
people. Yeah.
his weirdo definition of the people, which is like actually a constitutional amendment, which would be voted by the Senate, and also I guess
The people of South Dakota get to decide whether or not Washington D.C. the people of Washington D.C. are allowed to have
have
representation.
which I just it sounds fair, right?
Even just the fact that the contrast between the numbers of people who live in even if you made those two the entire constituency, you said, all right, South Dakota, all of South Dakota and DC get to vote on whether or not DC becomes a state. DC has, I think, twice as many voters as the state of South Dakota.
It's about even. Like DC
Is
is
it,
nearly about,
or is it North Dakota that has half?
I don't know that any state has under 500,000 people in it. I think Washington D.C. has like right around 1 million. But like certainly I think Washington D.C. has a comparable population of Delaware, which I think has around 1 million people in it. Wyoming, North Dakota. I think I can come up with a handful of states that like DC has more people in. And like
Sure.
here's another example. Puerto Rico, the territory, routinely has an election amongst themselves on whether they would like to enter in the union. It's actually a lot closer than people who would like to see Puerto Rico enter into the union would like. There are a lot of people who prefer their territorial status in Puerto Rico, but like they actually vote amongst themselves. It's not up to everyone else. They vote,
Yeah.
and they have a referendum. Like if you were actually going to do that, that's how you would do it. But note that Manchin's not supporting a non-binding referendum among the people of Washington D.C. to vote on whether or not they'd like to become a state or not. Like Manchin's just like, well, I think I know what's best for Washington D.C.
Sure.
No, I think it's a real question though for the Democrats. Like, okay, we've talked about the D.C. thing. Like, how much longer are they going to be able to endure Joe Manchin pouring cold water on everything? At some point, something has to give.
Particularly if you're making voting rights one of the tent poles of your platform or of your party. Like it's like there's a very rare, or I mean a very real dissonance like growing between like really pushing for statehood and pushing back against voting I mean there's virtue to pushing against voting restrictions anywhere, but there's a real hypocrisy in not pushing for this representation for these territories and these
are
people
also
who haven't been
these are part of voting rights.
represented.
Yeah. No, so I think it's gonna be a real problem, and it gets to kind of the weird electoral vision of the Democratic strategy right now, and this idea of like they got their ass handed to them by the census this last time around. Trump and his team went out of their way to nerf the census, to make people scared to submit the census, made people scared about the forms, and they got major dividends off of that. Like that whole little Jimmy game that they did this last time around won them like 10 seats, sort of just automatically, right? Like there's a real value in that.
To a degree, but like you have states like California and New York who can be just as rat fucky with the way that they redistrict their states. Like California doesn't necessarily lose a Democratic representative. They can just get rid, like the Democratic legislature of California can just redistrict away a Republican seat. I mean,
true, but
it's not right. It's not good or fair, but it's like they don't automatically get the 10 seats just by virtue of like the way that it broke out. I think some of them are going to be slightly closer.
That's true, but also states like New York. New York lost a seat by I think like something like triple digits, like a super teeny tiny margin.
I think it was double digits. I think it was 48.
Yeah, like that cost their state one representative off of that. No, I get you. It's not Democrat or Republican necessarily, but it is shifting from blue states to red states.
Sure.
In that sense. And no, like it's just bad. So like the Democrats need to be doing something to counteract that. So like the voting rights bill in Georgia is important. Not just principally. Like I agree with, I think we're all in agreement on the principles that everyone ought to have the right and access to vote. There's this dark history of Jim Crow and segregation and prohibition and access to the ballot. But like also real talk here on the politics strategy, the Democrats barely won Georgia, and by barely winning Georgia, they barely won the electoral college map. Their margin of winning all of this stuff is actually a lot tighter than they realize. So it is this all hands on deck sort of situation right now with voters. Turnout matters, access matters.
I think there is going to be a weird push, and again, it's how happy we end up being with what ends up getting done with this push. I could probably guess, but I think with the census, with the voting rights stuff in Georgia, and with Manchin and Collins, I think there is going to be a push to get stuff done within this year, within next year, because I think the reasoning is they probably had an idea of which way the census was going to go. They saw how close the election was and that it came down to Georgia, and they see what Republicans are doing in these states now with voting rights. I think there's going to be a push, however watered down it gets by people like Manchin. I think there is going to be something that comes out with the minimum wage. I think there is going to be something that comes from DC statehood. And I think on the back end of that, I think the push from Democrats is going to be, unlike in the Obama years when they had the supermajority and they could have just, they didn't do anything. They just sat on their hands and pretended, oh, we can't do anything. They won't work with us. Oh my gosh. They're going to try to remind you of all the good stuff they did in that first term with Joey.
Even better, they'll do it at the lame duck session.
Yes.
That lame duck session when they lose everything, they're going to pass a whole bunch of good shit, and it's going to be like, why didn't you do this before the election, you dopes?
Yes. And I think there will be a push for some stuff to happen before, and I think there will be stuff that they do after. And I think the push will be vote for us, vote for Joe's second term, vote us back in for our like terms in Congress and everything. And it'll be, remember, we passed that voting rights in 2021, 2022, where we did this with DC statehood in 2022, 2023. And then like come 2024, it's like, Joe, it's like, keep going forward, or some dumb slogan like that. And it'll be reminding you of the little victories you got here and there that are going to be watered down by Manchin the same way the healthcare plan was watered down back in Obama's time.
Yeah,
I think like,
Manchin is
we've seen this playbook before.
Yep.
The president is the guy who was number 2 last time, but this is the same playbook. We're going to get the stuff we want. It's gonna be shitty.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Manchin's the new Balkus. I completely agree.
I was thinking that the Biden's now acceptance of pushing for a $15 minimum wage is just because they've probably seen some testing or polling on where like the PRO Act actually polls with people versus where it polls with their donors, and they're not going to be able to back the PRO Act. They can back $15 minimum wage, which is going to keep people from ripping their heads off when they very, very likely shoot down the PRO Act for very bad reasons.
Yeah, I mean,
like, there's no reason that card check cannot happen in this country. It was,
and that was really essential for Biden.
Obama ran on.
Yeah.
Yep. No, but for Biden in the primaries here, when he needed to like wedge a little bit with Bernie and keep the unions from completely going to Bernie, Biden was basically like, I was always good on this stuff.
He brought up card, like he had brought out card check again.
Yep.
Dan nailed it. I think the $15 is the healthcare plan, and I think our single payer is the PRO Act, and the PRO Act has to die the same way the single payer died. Yeah,
that's interesting. And if Manchin can deliver, I guess the trick is to convince Manchin that him killing the PRO Act, he can go and crow about that to his support. That'll probably play better in West Virginia than killing minimum wage.
I think he's already there. I think a lot of this is just theater and him being walked to the water. And I think it's him putting up the face that he knows he needs to the people who are going to be mad at him. I think he's already there.
Okay, so we kind of we talked about Joe Biden's State of the Union, but like it really everything does sort of depend on whether Joe Manchin. So like Manchin reading will continue to be like a sport here over the next couple of years, unfortunately.
God help
However,
us.
yeah, I know, right? Yeah, this is a little bit of my own private hell monkey's paw. I wanted Trump out of office, but now I have to deal with Joe Manchin all the time. Um, Tim Scott delivered the response to the State of the Union. Did you all watch this or the address to Congress?
I saw a lot more about this than I did Joe's speech.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, I watched this. It just so happened that I got it. I was like, oh, that's on. And I popped it on. And I watched it. I did see more of this, frankly, than Joe's State of the Union, too, because I just read that later. Scott started off fine. There were points where he seemed almost likable-ish. And then, like, things really started going off the rails when he started, like, basically, like, he tried to argue that like his family had a bunch of different disadvantages growing up, and they overcome all these different adversities, and then goes, and that's what made COVID-19 so hard to watch because like essentially having to shut down society because of this virus that was ripping through the country would have made it impossible for me to succeed, like begging of course the question of like well Tim, like really, like what are we supposed to do? But the line that everyone's discussing here is America is not a racist country, which is actually genius Republican red meat, if I may. It's genius because racist country is a phrase that means nothing. Like it at once evokes something, it evokes a visceral reaction from the core, but at the core of it, what is racist country? What does it mean? Like I think we can fill in our own definition, but if Dan, Cody, and I all kind of tried to come up with it, it'd be similar. There'd be overlap, but it'd be a bit of your choose your own adventure. And that's the genius of America is not a racist country.
It allows for so much special pleading and so much for like it's got a built-in straw man for you to like hyperbolically point at and be like, it's like this, we don't have people in concentration camps, so it's not a racist country, or like it's
No, it really is that. It's like, well, we're not. I mean, are we killing Jews? How can you say America's a racist country where there are no ethnic cleansings going on in America right now?
at present.
At present. Yeah, no, I mean, how could you say America's a racist country when we've had exactly one black president, exactly one non-white president, which unfortunately was something that James Clyburn brought up in defense of Tim Scott. Like, I don't think America's a racist country. We had Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. Would America elect a black person as president if they were racist?
I think there's been eight presidents that weren't explicitly Anglo, like weren't specifically descended from English stock.
I mean,
It's just
it's like the whole thing's asinine, but it's again for a Republican talking point. It's like a genius talking point because
Yeah.
we, of course, all three of us would argue, boo in our face. Yeah, no, duh. Like America's got some real racism issues. If you want to say it's not actively a racist country, I don't know what that phrase means. So I can't argue with you. But if you want to argue, was America a racist country? I can argue that one pretty easy. Like having black people count as 3/5 of a person, having to have a whole civil war over slavery, never electing a black person to be president anytime during the 18th, 19th, or 20th century. Any number of different things. Sort of the fact that they had to pass multiple amendments ensuring equal protection under the law for races suggests it implies that America was indeed a racist country, at least at some point in the past.
the litany of broken treaties, the amount of land that is still actively, like, it's actively occupied land, like
But
from
yeah,
a legal point of view, if if people really care about sovereignty, or of course none of the people that actually rant about that kind of stuff would ever acknowledge any of those injustices.
No, no. And then they get to suck you into a debate about esoterica, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the real genius of this. It's a time suck argument. Oh, and it's a clever one. It's a clever one because like right wingers are always like, and this plays into the right winger pathology of like, oh, I don't know if I'm sure you guys have heard this line where they're like, I don't even know what racism means anymore. Like people say racist so much now, I don't even know what racist means, and like this plays perfectly into that. What does racist country mean? Like I sort of know, but also again, I earnestly don't. It means something and yet it means nothing at the same time.
It foists all of the effort back onto the accuser or back onto the essentially the aggrieved party.
Yes, yes. It
Like
puts
it's a very I'm rubber, you're glue, or not I'm rubber, you're glue. But it reflects it puts more work on the person to further define what they're trying to say.
Yeah. It forces the marginalized group to try to explain to the person who is marginalizing them why they are marginalized in the very first place. And then of course they can just throw back any number of their like token go-to favorite little arguments about like why you're not like, I mean, right down to the classic like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which there was like definitely an air of that in his speech as well. Has there ever been, and I am struggling, and I really started watching these when Obama got elected, so my like scope is limited.
a successful one of these.
None of these have ever been good. I feel like every single person who has ever done a response to a presidential address like this from the opposing party has ever had a successful one. This feels like this is where your political career goes to die. I think of Bobby Jindal's one. I think that's like one that like the Mitch Daniels one.
Gotta take a sip of water real quick. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and the Democratic ones that happened under Trump all made me wish for the sweet embrace of death as well. And like
They did like Tim Kaine. Who else did they? Tim Kaine sucked. Who was the other? I'm trying to even think.
the fact that you can't remember these. Like,
Tim Ryan did one. Tim Ryan
Yes.
did one. I remember that. And I was like, that guy sucks. He's never going anywhere.
and he didn't. Spoiler alert.
Really shocking stuff.
Tim Kaine, Kaine Manian, just we're still waiting.
Well, crazy that he didn't even run for the primaries here this last time around, right? You would have thought he was a clear front runner. Oh, yeah, no, I don't think any of these ever go anywhere. I mean, by that spectrum, I guess Scott did okay, but I also think Scott had a bad speech here, and could have had an okay outing if like he had basically just muted down the language a little bit, like um, I mean, he's wrong on all the issues and the merits. I'm just talking about political strategy here. I think like it was a real disaster for him. All right, let's talk about bad strategy here. One last item of bad strategy that we got to talk about. This week, the CDC announced a couple of things. One, that you no longer need a mask outdoor in most situations except for large gatherings, which is good, except that I'm sure what everyone's going to hear is you don't need a mask at large gatherings anymore, which alarms me about that.
Yep.
But then more importantly, or I guess not more importantly, but another thing that I'm noting here is the CDC announced that they want to quit or they want to stop selling menthol cigarettes. The FDA wants to ban all menthol cigarettes entirely. Biden administration announced its intention on Thursday, this is from CBS, to ban menthol cigarettes, flavored cigars, including menthol. Banning menthol, the last allowable flavor in cigarettes, and banning all flavors in cigars will help save lives, particularly among those disproportionately affected by those deadly products. What gets sort of neglected here is who is disproportionately, quote unquote, affected, as in disproportionately enjoys those products, are largely African Americans in this country here. There are fun fact, over 18.9 active smokers right now. And that's not lost in the FDA. The FDA says this will help reduce youth initiation increase the chances of smoking cessation among current smokers, I guess, address health disparities experienced by communities of color and low-income populations and LGBTQ plus individuals, all of whom are more likely to use these tobacco products. Like, here's actually a great example of what's wrong with this, right? So why do LGBTQI people smoke more? It's not because being gay makes you like having cigarettes. It's because you are leading a high stress lifestyle. And
Generally working in the service industry.
right. Also, why do low income people smoke more? Right. Why do people in restaurants smoke more?
For an
Because
excuse to step outside for 3 minutes.
yes, yes, these are break activities. And all that is going to happen is people are going to seek this stress relief in some other means that is not going to be like quote unquote more healthy. I think like the FDA naively thinks, oh, okay, we'll put this in and everyone's going to take up Yahtzee and yo-yoing and they'll finally be able to get all that nervous energy out.
Yeah, you're going to go out back and do your 5 minutes of jumping jacks.
All right, hey, you guys want to play a spirited game of Foursquare out back? Now that we've kicked the habit, double bounces are legal, as is body language. Right? No, that's not how this is gonna work. And then of course we can pivot into if this is the FDA's own research on this, that they think it's going to disproportionately affect communities of color and the LGBTQI community, and we think back to who the Democratic electorate is. You can kind of see how this might actually be a problem. And I don't think if you're having a hard time imagining this, remember like a couple of years ago, less than a couple of years ago, the Trump administration was briefly thinking about outlawing all flavors of vaping, that they were going to go after vaping, and they experienced a massive pushback on this. I remember I was still working in an office at the time, and there were people who were not particularly political people, who like basically like wish they never had to hear about politics ever, but they all came up to me the day that story broke and started making its way around Facebook and stuff, and started asking me, Chris, what's gonna happen with this vaping thing? You tell me everything you know, like I'm like the guru of all politics, like, you know. But like, these are the exact type of stories that ripple into people's lives and get regular everyday people who are not normally activated to vote very angry or very motivated to not vote, and stay home and stay out of things.
I don't know if it like a smoking cessation or an anti-tobacco group recently got a ton of money and was able to put a lot of like literature in front of a lot of Democratic eyes from the local level up, because out here in California, the town to town, it's like different town councils are trying to outdo themselves in weird idiosyncratic bans on types of tobacco and like flavored nicotine products. I think because it's easy, like it's something to do, it's easy to pass. Like I don't know if there was some
You're
push that
you're
put a
always
bunch,
technically beating up on a minority group. The minority group in this case is smokers. And so it's like, oh, I'm not picking on black people and gay people. I'm picking on smokers. Smokers are bad. Smoking is bad, you know. But then you think about the group that you're actually targeting here.
but it's there's just the area that I'm in California. We probably have some of the, like particularly Sonoma County, we probably have some of the lowest levels of smoking in the country. Like everybody, it's a very outdoor, nature heavy community, nature heavy culture up here. And it's still a bugaboo. It's still something for politicians to go after, to be doing something.
So I'll tell you this. Before the show, you and I were talking. You know, I live in North Dallas. I live in the neighborhood. I got a lot of black friends. I've smoked cigarettes. I shouldn't be smoking cigarettes. It's not good. I've quit. But I used to smoke a fair amount. I've smoked cigarettes, many cigarettes, and I was really trying to rack my brains this week as we were prepping this story to think of a black friend of mine who smokes non-menthol cigarettes, and like I could not come up with one. And that's entirely anecdotal, right? Like, okay, yeah, I may actually know a fair amount of people, and I do, but I like literally couldn't come up with it on my life experience. But I also haven't been making mental notes my entire life, right? So now, well, the reason my eyes are bugging out here just a second ago is I pulled up the FDA study on this. According to the FDA, there are nearly 18.6 million people who are current smokers of menthol cigarettes. Of them, 85% of African American smokers smoke menthol cigarettes. So this legislation is disproportionately going to be targeting African American populations under this weird FDA paternalist mentality that we're going to get everyone to quit. Like, they have these brilliant ideas of like how we're going to get everyone to quit cigarettes off of this. They think they're going to have 1 million people off of cigarettes in 13 to 17 months because of this. I'll tell you what you're going to have in 13 to 17 months. A bunch of people smoking Marlboro Reds.
Thriving black market.
Yep. A thriving black market of imported cigarettes from Russia and from Mexico and other places where you can still get menthol cigarettes. You're going to have a lot more people smoking Reds. They're not going to be off of them. And then, oh, by the way, we didn't even mention the flavored blunts thing. So, like,
Yeah.
which also gets back into Joe Biden's continuous war on marijuana. And again, all these people buying these cigarettes, cigarettes aren't good, don't smoke. They're all adults. It's like me saying, alcohol is not good for you, don't drink. You're an adult. If you want to go to the same convenience store you buy those pack of cigarettes and buy alcohol after you get done listening to the show, or while you're listening to this show and you're over the age of 21, this is America. That's what being an adult is.
Sure.
Cody, any thoughts on this?
I think part of it is, yeah, like a special interest group got a lot of money and is like pushing some weird acts. And I think a lot of it is also Grandpa Joey being Grandpa Joey and pushing against the things he doesn't like. And one of those is weed. And the other is those damn cigarettes.
Smoking is bad. And yeah, like, it's just funny where the Democrats choose to be hyper paternalistic and other places were like, oh, I don't want to offend anyone's liberty or whatever. Mask mandate. God, oh, legal binding on wearing masks. Oh, but let's go after menthol cigarettes. as though black people haven't had it hard enough during this pandemic.
Yeah. they really need, like, any person of color, person of the LGBT community needs any more interaction with law enforcement or any sort of like regulatory apparatus.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be the next thing, right? Like, I mean, go back to Eric Gardner selling Lucy's on the street here. There's going to be a menthol black market that forms.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, all the feds
we're getting back into the 20s, Chris.
No, yeah, I'll tell you what. I don't think you're wrong on this one. I think that this is one of these ones where they think, oh, we're going to illegalize menthol and it's going to be fine. I think this bites them in their ass. We're coming up against...
Every convenience store is going to be selling a spray bottle of menthol spray for you to spray on your cigarettes that's going to be nice and thoroughly regulated and coming from an awesome source.
Yeah, or someone's going to be selling it right outside, or people are going to sell it on the outside. Show's called Don't Worry About the Government. That's Dan. I'm Chris. He's Cody. Follow the show. Patreon.com/DWATG, at DWATG on Twitter. Buck a show to support the show. Episode 520 is the next episode that is open line. So if you hated this show and you really want to get at me or Cody, let me know. And we'll make sure that Cody's there for the dunk tank. Cody, you gonna wear a swimsuit for the dunk tank?
No.
Okay. Well, dunk tank next episode. Be there, be square, and don't forget about the AV club that we're doing. If you want to hear more, listen to the beginning of the episode. Thank you all so much for listening. Until the next one, bye-bye. I'll send you guys another link here in a second.